What if I told you that a man who is already sitting inside a federal prison, already sentenced to 12 and a half years, is somehow making his situation dramatically, catastrophically worse every single week? What if I told you that his desperate attempts to look innocent are the very things that are proving he is not? And what if the person he is dragging down with is the same woman who stood by his side through every single scandal, every single public humiliation, every single tearful press conference with his own wife? Because that is exactly what is happening right now in the Josh Duggar case, and the receipts are sitting right there in federal court documents for anyone willing to read them. Today, we are going inside the special housing unit, inside the legal filings, and inside the mind of a man so convinced of his own genius that he cannot see he is building the walls of his own permanent cage. Welcome to Jenny Exposes. Let's get into it. If you are new here, hit that like button and subscribe right now, because this channel is where we go deeper than the headlines. We read the actual documents, and we connect every single dot. You do not want to miss what is coming in this video, because I promise you, by the end, your jaw is going to be on the floor. Now let's go. Let's set the scene. Picture a cell that is roughly 8 feet wide and 10 feet long. There is a metal bed, a metal toilet, a metal sink. There are no privileges. There is no general population access. There is no recreational time with other people. There is minimal outside contact. This is the special housing unit, what people inside the federal prison system simply call the SHU. It is essentially solitary confinement, and it is where Josh Duggar currently finds himself, according to reporting and court filings surrounding his ongoing legal battle. Now, the SHU is not where you end up for good behavior. The SHU is where the Federal Bureau of Prisons sends you when you have allegedly violated the rules, seriously violated the rules, and according to what has been reported, Josh allegedly found himself in that situation after contraband devices were reportedly discovered in connection with him. And this was allegedly not the first time. We are talking about a man who is in federal prison for crimes involving digital devices and the internet, allegedly attempting to get his hands on unauthorized communication technology while sitting inside a federal facility. The level of either arrogance or delusion required to do that is genuinely staggering. And I need you to keep that detail in the back of your mind, because it becomes the lens through which everything else in this story makes perfect sense. Now, here is where the legal disaster truly begins. Every person who is convicted of a federal crime has a right to challenge their conviction through what is called a habeas corpus petition. It is essentially a legal motion arguing that something went fundamentally wrong during your trial or sentencing. There are strict deadlines for these filings, and those deadlines are not flexible. The federal courts are not interested in your excuses. They are not interested in your circumstances. You either file on time or your window closes. And in Josh's case, that window was reportedly the June deadline for his motion to vacate his conviction. Now, here is where the story shifts from merely dramatic to genuinely jaw-dropping. The envelopes, the actual physical envelopes containing his legal filings, allegedly took approximately 2 months to travel from the prison to the court. 2 months. For mail that should have arrived in days. And the federal government looked at that timeline and said, something is very wrong here. Because when you are filing legal documents in federal court, those filings go through the prison's official legal mail system. And that system keeps records. It logs when mail is accepted, when it is processed, when it is sent. And when the government went looking for those records to verify Josh's claim that he mailed everything on time, the records were not there to support his version of events. That is not a minor clerical issue. That is the kind of discrepancy that makes federal prosecutors pay very close attention. But wait, because this is where the story stops being just about Josh and starts being about Anna. Anna Duggar, who has 9 children, who has been photographed visiting her husband in prison, who has by all public appearances remained completely devoted to a man whose crimes against children are a matter of federal record. Anna is reportedly not just a supportive wife watching from the sidelines here. According to what has been reported and what is reflected in the court proceedings, Anna allegedly became directly involved in the preparation and handling of these legal documents. We are talking about a situation where Josh's filings were reportedly typed up, prepared, and in at least one instance, allegedly hand-delivered to the court by or through Anna. Now, I want you to think about what that means for a moment. Josh is sitting in a federal prison. He is already in legal jeopardy. And rather than using the proper, official, documented legal channels to handle his appeal, he allegedly involved his wife, the mother of his 9 children, in the process of getting these documents to the court in a way that bypassed the normal prison mail logging system. The federal government is now raising serious questions about whether what happened with those documents constitutes obstruction, whether signatures were placed on documents in ways that misrepresent the facts, and whether the timeline that Josh swore to under penalty of perjury is actually true. And every single one of those questions has the potential to become a new legal problem, not just for Josh, but for Anna. Here is why the perjury angle is so critical. When you file a federal court document and you sign it, you are signing under penalty of perjury. That means you are swearing, legally and formally, that the statements you are making in that document are true. Josh signed documents claiming that he submitted his habeas corpus filing on time, that he mailed it within the legal deadline. But the prison's own records reportedly do not corroborate that claim. There are no logs, no official documentation from the facility that back up his version of the timeline. So you have a man who is already a convicted felon, already serving a 12-and-a-half-year sentence, who has now potentially signed a false statement in a federal court proceeding. That is not a technicality. That is a pathway to new criminal exposure on top of what he is already serving. And here's the thing about the federal system that people often do not fully appreciate. They do not let things like this slide. Federal prosecutors do not look at a potential perjury situation in the middle of an active habeas corpus proceeding and decide it is not worth their time. They look at it and they see exactly the kind of conduct that they make examples of. Now I need to take you to what might genuinely be the most surreal part of this entire story, because what I am about to tell you sounds like something out of a movie, except it is documented in actual federal court filings. Josh Duggar, a man convicted of receiving and possessing child sexual abuse material, reportedly told a federal judge in writing, in an official legal document, that he could not properly prepare his case because the government had seized his computers and electronic devices. And his explanation for why he needed those devices back? He claimed he was conducting his own active investigation. He described his computers as a repository, his word for his personal ongoing investigation into the case against him. He framed himself as essentially a private investigator, a researcher, someone who was actively building a counter case against the people and the system that convicted him. I want you to sit with that for a moment. A man convicted of crimes involving the downloading and storage of illegal material on his devices is telling a judge he needs those same devices back because they contain his investigative files. The breathtaking quality of that argument is something that legal observers genuinely struggle to process when it emerged. But it gets worse. Because Josh did not just claim he was running a passive investigation in his defense. He actually revealed in these filings what some of that so-called investigation involved. He admitted that he had been actively gathering information, audio recordings, photographs, personal information on the people who had reported his activities, the whistleblowers, the sources who came forward and spoke about what they knew. He was building files on them. He was collecting what he apparently viewed as dirt. He was treating the people who cooperated with law enforcement as targets for his own personal counter-campaign. And he is trying to use a federal courtroom as the platform from which to launch that campaign. Now, I want you to think about the psychology of what that reveals. An innocent person, when they are fighting to prove their innocence, focuses on the evidence in their own case. They look at forensics, they look at the chain of custody, they look at whether proper procedures were followed. What they typically do not do is build dossiers on the witnesses against them and then brag about it to a federal judge. That behavior is not the behavior of someone trying to prove they did not do something. That is the behavior of someone who is angry, who feels they were exposed, and who wants to punish the people who exposed them. And then we get to Caleb Williams. This is a name that comes up in the context of this case, and it is one that deserves serious attention. Josh Duggar, prior to his arrest and conviction, was running the family car dealership, the Duggar car lot. And among the people he reportedly hired and housed at that property was a man named Caleb Williams, a man who, according to public records, was a registered offender with a history that included computer-related issues and who reportedly had advanced IT skills. Josh hired this man. Josh gave this man access to the car lot, to the property, to the business operations. Now, Josh and his defenders have pointed to Caleb Williams as part of an alternative theory, essentially arguing that someone else could have been responsible for the illegal material found on the network at the car lot. And on the surface, if you are not paying close attention, that might sound like a reasonable thing to raise in a legal defense. But here is the problem. Here's the thing that his own argument exposes. Josh knowingly hired a person with a documented history and known technical capabilities and put him in a position of access. Whether that was intentional or careless, it raises a devastating question. Why? Why does a man with a wife and children and a public ministry hire someone with that specific background and give them that specific access? There is no answer to that question that makes Josh Duggar look better. Every possible explanation makes him look worse. And this is where the broader Duggar family strategy becomes visible, because what we are talking about with Caleb Williams is not an accident. It is a pattern. There is a long history in the Duggar world of dealing with problems internally, of keeping things within the family circle, of using the structure of the ministry and the community to manage information and manage reputations. And when something goes wrong, when law enforcement does show up, when the cameras do appear, there is always someone else to point to. There is always a way to redirect the narrative toward another person, another explanation, another possibility. Jim Bob Duggar has spent decades constructing a public image built on the idea that this family is uniquely blessed, uniquely disciplined, uniquely righteous. And the mechanism that keeps that image intact, even when reality threatens to collapse, is the same mechanism every time. Deflection, redirection, and the strategic presence of alternative explanations. Caleb Williams, in Josh's legal filings, is being positioned as exactly that kind of alternative explanation. Someone else was there. Someone else had access. Someone else had the skills. Look over there, not at me. It is a strategy that has worked for this family for a very long time, which is exactly why a federal court is the one arena where it is most likely to fail. Because federal courts are not reality television production companies looking to protect a brand. Federal courts are not church communities where a tearful confession and a private counseling session makes the problem disappear. Federal judges have seen every version of the blame deflection strategy that exists, and they are specifically trained and experienced in identifying when someone's legal argument is constructed not around facts, but around narrative. And the judge in Josh Duggar's case has had front-row access to Josh's narrative because Josh keeps writing it down and submitting it as official court documents. Now let's talk about Jim and Bobby Holt. Because in the middle of all of this, the shoe, the missed deadlines, the document questions, the Caleb Williams angle, Josh has also been using his legal filings to go after this couple specifically. Jim and Bobby Holt are significant to this case because Bobby Holt is reportedly someone who testified about Josh's teenage behavior, specifically about confessions that Josh allegedly made about his actions when he was a teenager. Those confessions, those early admissions about what Josh did to his own sisters when they were children, became part of the public record and part of the broader context in which his federal conviction was understood. And Josh, in his filings, has gone after the Holts aggressively. He has attacked their credibility. He has raised the details of a custody case that the Holts were involved in and tried to use those details to paint them as unreliable, as dishonest, as people with motives to lie. He's essentially running a character assassination campaign against witnesses inside his own legal filings. Now, here is the strategic problem with that approach, beyond the obvious moral issues. When you attack a witness in a legal proceeding, you need to establish that their testimony was false, and that the false testimony materially affected the outcome of your case. You cannot just say someone is a bad person and expect that to do legal work for you. And in Josh's case, the question of what Bobby Holt did or did not say about Josh's teenage behavior is actually a very small piece of a very large evidentiary picture. The conviction was built on digital forensic evidence, on what was found on the computer network at the Duggar car lot, on the specific files that were downloaded, on the technical trail of how and when those files arrived on that system. Attacking a witness who testified about Josh's character and history does not touch that forensic evidence. It does not make those files disappear. It does not change what the forensic analysis showed. So all Josh is accomplishing by going after the Holts in his filings is demonstrating to the court that he would rather attack people than address the actual evidence against him. Which, again, is exactly the kind of behavior that makes a judge look at a defendant and see someone who is not engaging seriously with the legal process. And then there is Anna. We keep coming back to Anna because we have to. Because Anna Duggar is not a peripheral figure in this story anymore, if she ever really was. She has reportedly been involved in the logistics of Josh's legal filings in ways that the federal government is scrutinizing very carefully. She has continued to visit him, to support him, to present herself to the outside world as a faithful wife standing by her husband. She has posted about faith and perseverance. She has raised their 9 children largely in the shadow of a situation that would have broken most people into pieces. And I am not here to tell you that Anna Duggar is a villain, because I genuinely do not think the full picture of who Anna is and what she has been through is something any of us can see completely from the outside. What I can tell you is that the situation she is currently in, the specific legal situation where her involvement in Josh's filings is being questioned by federal prosecutors, is one of the most dangerous positions she has ever been in. Because the federal government does not look at someone's circumstances and say, well, she was raised in this environment and she has been conditioned to be obedient, so we will give her a pass. The federal government looks at conduct. It looks at actions. And if the actions taken in connection with those court documents cross the line into obstruction or making false statements, the fact that Anna Duggar loves her husband and wants him to come home is not a legal defense. This is the part of the story that should genuinely concern everyone watching, regardless of how you feel about Josh, regardless of how you feel about the Duggar family as a whole. There are 9 children whose mother is now potentially in the crosshairs of a federal investigation because their father, from a prison cell, allegedly pulled her into his legal strategy. Those children have already lost the daily presence of their father to a federal prison sentence. The idea that they could lose their mother too, not to a crime she committed independently, but to the consequences of being loyal to a man who appears to have very little regard for the people around him, that is a tragedy that sits completely apart from the spectacle of watching Josh Duggar's legal strategy collapse in real time. And collapse it is doing. Because when you step back and look at everything that is in these filings, the missed deadlines, the document questions, the perjury exposure, the investigator delusion, the witness attacks, the Caleb Williams redirect, what you see is not a legal strategy. What you see is a man who has never once in his life been held fully accountable by the people who were supposed to hold him accountable, finally facing an institution that is completely immune to charm, to family loyalty, to faith-based appeals, and to reality television fame. The federal court system does not care that Josh Duggar grew up on camera. It does not care how many kids his parents had. It does not care about the Duggar brand or the counting on legacy or any of it. It cares about evidence, about procedure, about whether the filings were made on time, and whether the statements in those filings are true. And Josh, sitting in his 8x10 shoe cell, having allegedly been caught with contraband devices for what is reportedly not the first time, filing legal documents that sign him up for potential new perjury exposure, attacking witnesses instead of addressing evidence, claiming he is an investigator, and pulling his wife into the middle of it all. Josh is failing on every single one of those measures simultaneously. His arrogance is not just showing, it is doing active legal damage every time he puts pen to paper or allegedly gets access to a device he is not supposed to have. The judge in this case has now had the opportunity to observe Josh's behavior, Josh's arguments, and Josh's apparent strategy across multiple filings and proceedings. And what judges do in cases like this is exactly what they are trained to do. They evaluate credibility. They look at whether someone's account is internally consistent. They look at whether the claims someone is making line up with the documented record. They look at whether a person is engaging with the actual substance of their legal situation, or whether they are performing for an audience that does not exist in the courtroom. And every indicator available from the public record of this case suggests that the judge is seeing Josh Duggar very clearly, not through the lens of the family brand, not through the lens of the reality show, not through the lens of the tearful post-arrest statement, but clearly for exactly who he appears to be, A man who has never truly believed the rules applied to him, finding out in the most consequential way possible that they do. The habeas corpus motion is likely to fail. The document questions are not going away. The scrutiny on Anna is not going away. And Josh Duggar is going to remain in that shoe or somewhere very much like it while the legal system finishes processing every single consequence of the decisions he keeps making. He had lawyers. He had a legal process available to him. He had a pathway, however narrow, to challenge his conviction through legitimate means. And he has spent that pathway on delusion, on vendettas, on alleged rule breaking, and on dragging the people closest to him into the blast radius of his own destruction. That is not the behavior of a man who is trying to get out of prison. That is the behavior of a man who cannot stop being who he is, even when who he is keeps costing him everything. So is Anna Duggar going to end up facing federal consequences for her role in all of this? That is the question sitting at the center of everything right now. And it is the question that I want you to drop your thoughts on in the comments below. Tell me what you think is going to happen next, because this story is not done by a long shot. If you watch this entire video, I need you to hit that like button right now because it genuinely helps this channel reach more people who deserve to know what is actually happening in cases like this. Subscribe to Jenny Exposes if you are not already part of this community, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a video. We are going to keep watching this case. We are going to keep reading these documents, and we are going to keep bringing you every twist as it happens. I will see you in the next one.